Ask the average person and they will say that global risks are rising. Businesses seem to agree. That's always a concern, but it's particularly alarming today. 10 years of economic growth between us and the Great Recession would normally have lowered global risks by this point. With things going in the opposite direction, there seems to be a randomness to them. And in the chaos, leaders are being elected and acting on platforms that are further increasing the risk. What's going on? On the international trade front, the obvious big risks are Brexit, the US-China tariff war, rejection and renegotiation of key trade deals, existential threats to the WTO process, and the more insidious non-tariff barriers that can and do surface in an increasingly protectionist environment. Add to these issues the tendency for protectionism to escalate, the U.S. retreat from defending and funding global institutions, threatened and real military conflicts and financial market volatility, and one can get an uncomfortable sense that the system is unraveling. This is what we can see on the surface. Are there key causes? There is no lack of proposed answers. It's a well-worn list. General discontent is attributed to a global distribution that is increasingly skewed to a privileged few, to a new global corporate concentration that might not have been tolerated a generation or two ago, to the advent of social media, which gives individuals a global reach for their messages, and other forms of communication that enable instant mass rallying on contentious and divisive issues, of increasing digitization and the technical displacement of workers, on the perverse economic growth dynamics of aging populations, on electoral volatility with voters yo-yoing from one ideological wing to another, or electoral polarization, and probably a host of other possibilities. On these topics, there's no lack of daily discussion. But are there root causes of the basic discontent? Perhaps. An interesting and critical observation about populism is that for the most part, it's ubiquitous. Normally, there are pockets of discontent, but at the moment, most countries on the planet seem to be dealing with some strain of the disease. That points to a common cause, and in the view of our chief economist, the first default is insufficient global growth. That in turn has led to the view that globalization has amplified each phase of the business cycle, and the current one, the sluggish pre-recovery phase, is the one we are least prepared to deal with. It has pushed millions of potential workers to the side, and over time this has swelled the ranks of the discontented enough to cause general disruption. A second root element is the distortion caused by our novel ultra-loose monetary policy and the early attempts to rein it back in. Key economies, mostly in the emerging world, are being hit with financial market volatility, and it's arguable that the effects have only just begun to appear. In short, quantitative tightening and interest rate tightening have a long journey to normal. A third possible complication is the relative lack of fiscal room to ameliorate prolonged, weak growth. Much of the fiscal firepower was used up in the recession's immediate aftermath, leaving most governments, developed and emerging countries alike, little capacity to offset the consequences of economic conditions. Given the magnitude, pervasiveness, and duration of the situation, it seems clear that there are few fast fixes available. Current risks will persist. As such, EDC Economics will continue to anticipate, monitor, and analyze global economic and political risks. Our latest issue of the Country Risk Quarterly has just been released, summing up our analysis of up to 200 countries around the world, together with the hot risk issues of greatest concerns to Canadian exporters. EDC makes this available along with our financing and insurance solutions to mitigate global risks as much as possible. The bottom line, today's global risk environment is not going away anytime soon. If there's any consolation, we are not alone. Every exporter around the world has to deal with them. Developing winning risk mitigation strategies is increasingly the formula for global success. I'm Susanna Campagna. Peter Hall will be back next week.